They didn't have high-tech weapons or elite teams. Just ingenuity, wit, patience, and audacity. These are the real-life criminals who played cat and mouse with law enforcement and won. For a while, from jailbreaks to digital ghosting, their stories sound like movie plots. But they're 100% real. These are top 10 smartest criminals ever to walk the wild side of the law, who didn't just commit crimes. They outsmarted entire governments. Before we start, subscribe to our channel for true crime, scam, and investigative stories that will give you chills. Now the story. Number 10. Frank Abagnale Jr., the master impostor. He wasn't a killer. He didn't rob banks with a gun. He used a pen and a smile. Imagine being 16 years old and tricking the world into thinking you're a commercial airline pilot. Not once, not twice, but for over 250 flights across 26 countries. This is not fiction. This is the true story of Frank Abagnale Jr., a teenage mastermind who faked identities, forged checks, and outsmarted the FBI for years. Before he turned 21, he had been a pilot, doctor, lawyer, and millionaire. And he did it all without a single college degree, professional license, or proper training. He was a master of disguise, a psychological genius, and the definition of charm. Frank William Abagnale Jr. was born in 1948 in Bronxville, New York. His childhood was ordinary until it wasn't. At age 12, he watched his parents' marriage fall apart. His father, once his hero, was crushed by divorce. And that pain planted the first seed. At 15, Frank ran away. With nothing but a checkbook and a stolen idea. He discovered a terrifying truth. If you look the part, people rarely question your authority. And so he began experimenting with simple check forgery. At first, it was petty. Then, it became a craft. Frank noticed one thing. People respected pilots. They got special treatment at hotels, airports, banks. So he created a fake Pan Am pilot ID, bought a second-hand uniform, and convinced the airline to give him travel privileges for employee training. He didn't actually fly the planes. He rode in the cockpit jump seat. Over 1 million air miles. Free. And he used this status to cash fake paychecks across the country. Why would anyone question a well-dressed pilot? Next, he forged a Columbia University transcript and became a supervising resident at a Georgia hospital. You heard that right. He was literally treating patients. Well, more accurately, he was supervising others who did the treating. He lasted nearly a year in the role until someone finally got suspicious. Frank quietly slipped away. No arrest, no headlines, just a new identity. After that, he moved to Louisiana. This time he forged a Harvard Law School degree and applied for a job at the Louisiana Attorney General's office. And here's the twist. He passed the state bar exam for real. He later admitted he studied for just 8 weeks, outsmarted the legal system, and got hired. All before he turned 21. As his crimes escalated, so did the consequences. Banks began noticing the fake checks. Airlines started connecting the dots. And the FBI got involved. But Frank was always one step ahead. He'd change his name, his appearance, his state. He even created fake FBI agents to throw off local police. The Bureau chased him through France, Sweden, and South America. But the con was finally running out of airspeed. In 1969, at age 21, Frank was caught in Montpellier, France, using a fake passport. He was arrested, convicted, and sentenced. After serving short prison terms in France and Sweden, Frank was extradited to the United States. He ended up at Federal Detention Center in Atlanta, but even there, he tried to escape by pretending to be an undercover prison inspector. The man never stopped conning. Eventually, he was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. But he only served 5 years. Why? Because the FBI made him a deal. Help us stop people like you. Frank Abagnale Jr. became one of the FBI's top white-collar crime consultants. He taught them how to detect forged checks, spot identity fraud, and track paper trails across states and countries. He worked with major banks, tech companies, and law enforcement agencies, creating tools to stop exactly what he once pioneered. Today, he's a celebrated security expert, author, and public speaker. He's even the subject of the Spielberg movie, Catch Me If You Can, with Leonardo DiCaprio playing his role. Frank Abagnale's story raises a chilling question. How far can charm and intelligence go without a conscience? He stole millions, lied his way into lives, careers, and institutions. But he also turned his brilliance into redemption. From conman to consultant, from fugitive to federal advisor. He didn't just outsmart the police, he helped train them, because sometimes the sharpest minds start on the wrong side of the law. Number 9. Colton Harris Moore, the Barefoot Bandit. He was 17. He had no pilot license, no formal training, and yet he stole planes, flew them, crashed them, then disappeared barefoot into the woods. This is the true story of Colton Harris Moore, the teenage outlaw who became a legend. To some, a thief. To others, a modern-day folk hero. Colton was born on March 22, 1991, on Camano Island, Washington, a remote forested island. Small population, big trees, not many opportunities. From a young age, Colton didn't fit in. By age 7, he was already breaking into homes. By 12, he was living in the woods for days at a time, surviving off stolen food and rainwater. He had a rough home life, an absent father, a mother who couldn't control him. School didn't help. He dropped out by 9th grade. His classroom became the forests. And his education? Stealing, running, hiding. At first, it was small stuff: burglaries, break-ins, food, camping gear. But Colton wasn't sloppy. He left no fingerprints, no witnesses. Only one clue: bare footprints in the mud. That's how he got the nickname, the Barefoot Bandit. By 2008, the police had dozens of unsolved burglaries across Washington state, but they couldn't catch him. He was too fast, too quiet, and he knew the forests better than anyone. Then came the escalation. He wasn't just stealing food or radios anymore. He started taking cars, then boats, and eventually, airplanes. Yes, airplanes. Colton allegedly stole his first small aircraft from a hangar in Idaho. No pilot license, no flight training. He taught himself using manuals, flight simulators, and YouTube videos. He managed to fly over mountainous terrain until he crashed in a field, then walked away barefoot. He would go on to steal at least 5 aircraft over the next 2 years. By 2009, Colton was on the FBI's radar, and the public's too. The media was obsessed. The teenage thief, the outlaw in the woods, the Barefoot Bandit. He had fan pages, t-shirts, folk songs written about him, but behind the legend was a kid on the run. He slept in empty vacation homes, broke into stores at night, dodged thermal drones and helicopters. He moved like a ghost. Despite hundreds of tips, law enforcement couldn't corner him. He was always a few steps ahead, or miles away on a stolen boat. In July 2010, Colton did the unthinkable. He stole a Cessna 400 from Indiana and flew 1,000 miles south to the Bahamas. It was the ultimate stunt. The final chapter in a 2-year spree across 8 states and 3 countries. But this time, he crashed near a mangrove swamp, and the Bahamian police were waiting. After a week-long island chase, they cornered him in a boat. Armed, surrounded, no escape, but instead of going out in a blaze, he raised his hands and surrendered. Back in the US, Colton faced over 30 felony charges. Stolen vehicles, break-ins, aircraft theft. The prosecution called him reckless, dangerous, a narcissist. But others saw something different. He never hurt anyone. He was polite during every break-in. He left notes, sometimes even left money behind. In 2011, Colton Harris Moore was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Behind bars, Colton was quiet, focused. He studied, took college courses, signed a movie deal using the profits to pay back victims. In a strange twist of fate, the teen who outwitted the FBI with his bare feet was now working on a degree in aeronautical engineering. In interviews, he later said, "I did things that were wrong, but I was desperate, and I was alone." Colton Harris Moore wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a lost kid with a genius for escape. He didn't steal for wealth. He stole for survival. But in doing so, he embarrassed federal agents, outwitted police across multiple states, and became a modern myth. The Barefoot Bandit didn't walk into history with shoes. He ran into it silent, wild, and free. Number 8. Gerald Blanchard, the criminal who used spy-level tech to steal a priceless jewel. He sold weapons that fueled wars, toppled governments, and killed thousands. But he wasn't a general, he wasn't a soldier, he was a businessman, and business was war. This is the story of Viktor Bout, the man they called the Merchant of Death. A Russian arms dealer so elusive, it took 3 continents, 2 decades, and an international sting operation to bring him down. Viktor Bout was born in 1967 in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, then part of the Soviet Union. He was fluent in 6 languages, served in the Soviet military, and possibly worked with GRU intelligence, though that part remains classified. When the USSR collapsed in the early 1990s, chaos followed. Weapons stockpiles were abandoned. Soviet aircraft went unsupervised. And Viktor saw opportunity in the ruins. He began buying military transport planes, massive cargo aircraft designed to carry tanks, troops, and arms. Then he built a fleet. Then he built an empire. Between 1992 and 2003, Viktor Bout became the world's most prolific illegal arms dealer. He didn't just sell weapons, he supplied entire rebel armies. Wherever there was war, famine, or revolution, his planes arrived. He armed the Taliban in Afghanistan. He supplied warlords in Sierra Leone and Liberia. He helped dictators in Angola, Congo, and Sudan keep power. Missiles, AK-47s, landmines, rocket launchers, millions of dollars, thousands of deaths. But Viktor was always a step removed. He used fake companies, fake manifests, fake names. To the world, he didn't exist, but his weapons did. By the early 2000s, Viktor Bout's name was whispered in intelligence circles. The CIA, MI6, and Interpol all had files on him. The United Nations called him a threat to global peace. He was the real-life version of Nicolas Cage's character in Lord of War, a man who made war portable. He had dozens of passports, used hundreds of front companies, and changed identities like clothes. He even ran flights for the US military during the Iraq War, at the same time as supplying their enemies. He was untouchable, until 2008. The DE launched Operation Relentless, a secret plan to lure Bout out of hiding. They posed as Colombian FARC rebels, seeking missiles and assault rifles to kill US agents. The bait was too perfect to ignore. Bout agreed to meet in Bangkok, Thailand. In a luxury hotel suite, he laid out his plan. "We have the same enemy, the Americans." Seconds later, the agents stormed in, guns drawn, cameras rolling. Viktor Bout was arrested. After 2 decades on the run, the Merchant of Death was finally in custody. Russia protested hard. They called the arrest illegal, demanded his release. But Thailand approved extradition to the US. In 2011, Viktor Bout stood trial in New York. He was charged with conspiracy to kill US citizens, conspiracy to provide material support to terrorists, weapons trafficking. He pled not guilty, called it all a political setup. But the evidence was overwhelming. Phone calls, meetings, witnesses. After a 3-week trial, the jury returned a verdict: guilty. Bout was sentenced to 25 years in prison at the US Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. And yet, his story wasn't over. He remained a national hero in Russia. Books were written, documentaries made. Some saw him as a victim of US hypocrisy. Others saw him as a brilliant villain. Then, in 2022, something unthinkable happened. Russia invaded Ukraine. Tensions between Moscow and Washington hit Cold War levels. And in the middle of it all, WNBA star Brittany Griner was arrested in Russia on drug charges. Negotiations began, and the US struck a deal. Griner for Bout. Critics were furious. Supporters were relieved, but one thing was clear. Viktor Bout, the Merchant of Death, was free again. Viktor Bout wasn't a warlord. He never pulled a trigger. He never marched an army. But he armed both sides of conflicts. He made chaos a commodity. And he outsmarted governments, airports, and intelligence agencies for over 20 years. He built a criminal empire with a passport and a cargo plane. And even after being captured, convicted, and imprisoned, he walked out a free man, traded like currency between superpowers. Because in the world of international crime, sometimes the deadliest weapon is a businessman with no conscience. Number 7. Annika Östberg, the charming manipulator. She was blonde, elegant, intelligent. She smiled often, spoke softly. She wasn't what you'd expect from someone involved in 2 murders. But Annika Östberg wasn't just a criminal. She was a master of influence. A woman who manipulated others to pull the trigger while she stayed one step removed. And when the law came for her, she vanished across borders. Annika Maria Östberg was born in Sweden in 1954, but moved to the US as a young girl. She grew up in California bright, sociable, artistic. But by her teenage years, she was spiraling. At just 13, she began experimenting with drugs. By 16, she was a heroin addict. She had a son at 17 and lost custody not long after. Desperate for love and stability, she attached herself to dangerous men. One of them would change her life forever. Bob Cox, a small-time drug dealer with a violent streak. In 1981, Annika and Bob Cox were driving through California with a sinister goal: to fund their drug habit through armed robbery. But things spiraled fast. Their first stop, a restaurant in Chico, California. Bob entered with a gun. The owner, Joseph Torr, resisted. Bob shot and killed him. Annika claimed she never held the weapon, but she was in the car. She helped plan it. And after the murder, she helped clean up the evidence. Instead of turning back, they drove further south. 2 days later, a California Highway Patrol officer, Larry Lasater, pulled them over. Routine traffic stop. Bob panicked. He shot Officer Lasater 3 times, killing him instantly. Annika sat beside him, silent. She didn't shoot. But again, she didn't stop it either. The murders triggered a statewide manhunt. Helicopters, roadblocks, local sheriffs. But by the time police tracked the couple down, Annika had vanished. Back to Sweden, using her dual citizenship to escape justice. Eventually, she was caught and extradited back to California. In court, she pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder. Her defense? She was under Bob's control, traumatized, manipulated, addicted, and many believed her. She smiled in court. She cried on cue. She claimed redemption and spiritual awakening. Even some of the jury members later said she seemed genuinely sorry. She was sentenced to 25 years to life. But the manipulation wasn't over. In prison, Annika was the model inmate. She wrote poetry. She mentored other inmates. She practiced yoga. She became fluent again in Swedish and made friends with prison staff. But behind the serenity, she was plotting. She began writing letters to Swedish politicians, journalists, and human rights activists, framing herself as a victim of the American justice system. She claimed to be reformed, misunderstood, unfairly treated. In Sweden, her campaign gained traction. By the early 2000s, Swedish politicians were lobbying for her return. A convicted accomplice in 2 murders, including a police officer. And yet, public opinion in Sweden began painting her as a rehabilitated soul. In 2009, after 28 years behind bars, the US agreed to a prisoner transfer deal. Annika Östberg was flown back to Sweden, a free woman after serving less than 30 years for 2 deaths. In Sweden, she gave televised interviews, spoke about prison reform, and began writing a memoir. Annika didn't need to shoot a gun to destroy lives. She manipulated others to act. She used sympathy, softness, and survival language to rewrite her story. In the US, she was a murderer. In Sweden, she became a celebrity, a voice for redemption, a misunderstood mother, a poet. But the families of the victims? They never forgot. Officer Larry Lasater's widow said, "She's not a victim. She's not a symbol. She's a manipulator." Annika Östberg never held the gun, but her fingerprints are on 2 coffins. She didn't escape prison with violence. She escaped it with charm, with words, with tears that may or may not have been real. Her case reminds us, not every smart criminal is a hacker. Not every mastermind carries a gun. Some wear a smile, speak with grace, and convince entire countries that they're the ones who were wronged. That is the genius of Annika Östberg, the charming manipulator. Number 6. Kevin Mitnick, the ghost in the machine. He didn't need a gun. He didn't break into buildings. He didn't kill anyone. But in the 1990s, he was America's most wanted criminal. The FBI called him the most dangerous hacker in history. Why? Because Kevin Mitnick could break into anything. NASA, IBM, Motorola, the Pentagon. He made phones ring in FBI offices, then vanish without a trace. This is the story of Kevin Mitnick, the man who turned a keyboard into a weapon and outsmarted the US government for years. Kevin was born in 1963 in Los Angeles, California. As a child, he wasn't a criminal, he was a curious genius. By 12, he figured out how to ride city buses for free using hole punch patterns. By 15, he discovered freaking hacking phone systems using tones and signals. He learned to clone phone numbers, intercept calls, and disappear into networks. His tool wasn't brute force. It was social engineering, manipulating people to give him access. While others used crowbars, Kevin used charm. In the late 80s and early 90s, Mitnick hacked his way through corporate America: Pacific Bell, IBM, Nokia, Motorola, Sun Microsystems, even the FBI itself. He didn't just break into systems, he lived in them. Stealing software, reading emails, wiretapping phones. He copied source code for cutting-edge cell phone tech. Sometimes he left no trace. Other times he left taunting messages. He never stole money. He just wanted to know how things worked. But his curiosity became a crime. And the FBI wanted him badly. By 1992, Kevin was a ghost. He vanished from Los Angeles, leaving no digital footprints. He became the first hacker in US history to make the FBI's most wanted list. He used stolen identities, fake addresses, cloned phones. He could listen to law enforcement chatter and knew when they were coming. He hacked FBI wiretap systems. He could delay arrests by jamming radio signals. He became a myth among hackers, a living legend. While agents raided one house, he was already across the country in another, but Kevin wasn't the only genius in the game. In 1994, a Japanese-American cybersecurity expert named Tsutomu Shimomura joined the hunt. Mitnick had broken into Shimomura's system on the stake. It was personal now. Shimomura, with help from the FBI, tracked Mitnick's digital movements, phone calls, IP addresses, packet traces. By early 1995, they had him cornered in Raleigh, North Carolina. Kevin was living under an alias, surrounded by tech, phones, modems. At 2 a.m., FBI agents raided the apartment. Kevin didn't resist. After 2 years on the run, the ghost was caught. Kevin Mitnick was charged with 25 counts of computer and wire fraud. He had over 20,000 stolen credit card numbers, access to classified software and telecom systems. But here's the twist. He never used any of it for money. No bank fraud, no ransomware, no stolen identities used for purchases. He did it because he could. Still, the government treated him like a cyber terrorist. He was denied bail, held in solitary confinement. They even claimed he could start a nuclear war by whistling into a payphone. Seriously. After serving 5 years in prison, Kevin was released in 2000. And then, he flipped the script. He became a white-hat hacker helping companies protect their systems. He founded Mitnick Security Consulting, wrote books like The Art of Deception and Ghost in the Wires. From criminal to consultant, from fugitive to keynote speaker at cybersecurity conferences, he proved the world didn't just need protection from hackers. It needed hackers who understood how it all worked. In July 2023, Kevin Mitnick passed away after a battle with cancer. He was 59. To some, he'll always be the rogue hacker who outwitted the US government. To others, he's a cybersecurity pioneer who turned his talents toward good. But one thing is certain, Kevin Mitnick wasn't just a criminal. He was a wake-up call to governments, corporations, and every internet user alive. He showed us that the real threat doesn't always come with a gun. Sometimes it comes with a dial tone and a 56K modem. Today, cybersecurity is a global industry worth hundreds of billions. And it's built on the lessons Kevin Mitnick taught the hard way. He didn't want fame. He didn't want fortune. He wanted access, and he got it more than anyone ever had. The ghost in the machine may be gone, but his fingerprints are still on the firewalls that now guard our world. These criminals weren't just dangerous. They were brilliant, elusive, and often one step ahead of the law. But no matter how smart they were, in the end, most were caught. If you found these stories fascinating, chilling, or downright unbelievable, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We've got more mind-blowing crime stories, psychological breakdowns, and investigative deep dives coming your way. Until next time, stay curious, stay alert for part 2. And remember, even the smartest criminals always leave a trail.